Welcome, low ego action heroes. I'm Debbie Levitt from Delta CX. We are a full service CX and UX consultancy. And this is my Axure 10 Core Skills course. I've been using Axure since February 2011, and I've been teaching it for many, many years. And in fact, I've been one of Axure's recommended trainers since 2014. This course is designed to take you from super Axure newbie or Axure afraid all the way through to confident intermediate. So if you've landed on this one video, there are many, many others. Please check our Axure lessons playlist for a lot more videos about using Axure. The Delta CX YouTube channel has over 500 videos on it as of when I'm recording this in December 2021, and I hope you'll subscribe and join in some of our live streams. I'm live usually 3 or 4 times a week with teaching UX research and design, talking about CX, helping people get into the profession, helping leaders and managers, and of course, don't forget Tuesday, office hours, Ask Me Anything. So subscribe and hang out here. So thanks for being here. Please subscribe and let's jump into that next Axure lesson.
In this lesson, let's get to know Axure panes. Now that's P-A-N-E-S, and you can show and hide them from this menu, or you might have set that up in your toolbar as well, though I don't have it in my toolbar. I took it out in the customization. But the panes are pages, outline, libraries, components, which in Axure 9 was called masters, interactions, notes, and styles. So notice 3 are on the right side, 4 are on the left side, but again, Axure has a completely customizable interface where you can set things up however you like. If I want to see interactions and style at the same time, I can just drag it around, move it around, do what I like with it, collapse this one if I need more space. So it's all very customizable. You can set the panes up how you like, and if you're ever freaking out and you just want to go back to the beginning, just click Reset View and Axure will snap into place as if you just reinstalled Axure. So let's talk about each one in some detail. Pages are the pages of your prototype. You want a page for every web page or system page that this is going to represent. If you're doing mobile app prototyping, which is a separate course that I offer, I do suggest that an entire mobile app be created in one page. That may sound weird, but remember, think about how web pages work. When we move from one page to another, the whole page blanks out, the screen sometimes goes white, and we have to wait for things to load. If you were moving screen to screen in a mobile app, we pretty much never see that. Unless they've put a web page in a shell, we typically never see the page go blank and we're just waiting for something to load. So for more realism, I would put my entire mobile app prototype on one page, but that's a separate course. So if we want to create another page, we can simply use this plus sign. We can give it a name. So I'm going to say your special page, but for no good reason. And I can right click on pages. Now it's a right click for me because I'm in Windows. If you are in Mac or maybe something else, I'm going to call it context menu click so that you know that that is a right click or command click or whatever it is for your system. And you can see there's a lot of things that we can do with our pages. We can do foldering, we can create parent and child hierarchies, we can rename them, we can duplicate pages or entire branches of hierarchies. And the diagram type mostly seems to change the icon for this thing and doesn't seem to do that much. And generate flow we'll talk about in a moment. So if I wanted to, I could say, well, special page is really kind of a sub thing to page 1. Now that doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean that the 2 pages inherit from each other. It doesn't mean that they are seen in any particular order. This is really just for you to organize your pages. If for some reason you believe a page has some sort of subpage, you can organize it like that. Totally up to you. And that would mean if you did a duplicate branch, you're going to get the page and the subpage. And you'll need to give them fresh names because they have kind of funky names. That's up to you. You can also create folders. So sometimes I'll do a folder for my information architecture, and I'll put things in there like site maps and user flows and some of the things that I'm doing related to that. If I'm doing it in Axure, sometimes I'm working in Miro, and sometimes it's here. And so I could say, well, this page was really information architecture, so I'm going to drop these guys in here. And then this is my interaction design version 1. Sometimes I use my folders for versioning because I come up with lots of different ideas. Now, obviously, this looks like a subfolder right now. I need to kind of drag it out. There we go. I can say page 1, and this is part of version 1. So again, you can organize this however it makes sense. But remember, the great thing about this is that if you do have some old versions you're not really using anymore, or some pages that aren't relevant, when you publish, you can not show those pages. So see the previous lesson about menus for where we control what gets published and what doesn't. So in short, these are the things that you can do with pages. They usually will match your sitemap in some way. But of course, you could have other extra pages here. Sometimes I create a page of what I call unused ideas, where I will just create, I'll start designing something and I'll kind of not like my own design, but if I think it's got possibility for something else in the future, I will copy paste it or cut and paste it onto unused ideas. And that's certainly a page I wouldn't want other people seeing. Now notice, as we made pages and opened pages, they now live here in these tabs. So I can close these tabs. It doesn't erase the pages, it just takes them out of my field of view. So here's our original page 1. If we go to the outline is kind of like, think about layers in your Adobe Creative Suite. So the idea is that whatever you've put on this canvas or workspace or page, now you can see it in its layered glory. So here I have an ellipse that's on top of a rectangle. Same thing here. Ellipse is on top of rectangle. These layers are in their layering order. If I were to drag and drop ellipse so that it's under rectangle, and there really isn't a hierarchy here, these are just layers, now you can see visually the box, the rectangle, is on top of the ellipse. So we could have changed that with things like bring to front and send to back and stuff like that, which is also available with your right click here with order. Or if I want, if it's easier for me, I can drag and drop here in the outline and say, nope, the box is behind the circle. And there are some times in Axure where that layering does matter. So for example, if this box is clickable, but this circle is partially overlapping it, what are we going to do about that? Do we need to change the layering? Does this look correct, but we need to figure out a different tappable area for this box? Because now this portion of the box is not going to be clickable or tappable because Axure sees the circle on top of it. So we'll solve that later when we learn about hotspots, but just a reminder of things you can do with the outline. There really isn't anything you can add here, but we do have filters, and you're going to see me use those filters later, because as we add more and more widgets and stuff to this page, it's going to get overwhelming. I've certainly created pages with dozens, if not hundreds of widgets on them, and man, oh man, you definitely want the outline and this filter to help you see only what's important to you. So for now, I just want you to know this is here. Later on, we're going to actually use this, and you'll see how the filter comes in handy when we've got a lot of stuff. Hello from the future. I'm recording some of the later lessons, and I wanted to swing back and show you something else that you can do with the outline. Now, when you have certain types of widgets and you're in the outline, so this is a dynamic panel, which you'll learn a lot about later on, you will see that when I hover over this, not only do I get the thumbnail of what it looks like, and I get the opportunity to add a state, which I promise will make sense to you later when you do those lessons, but notice I've got this blue dot. And it says hide from view. What this does, it's kind of like that eyeball in Adobe Creative Suite. The idea is that you won't see it. So it just disappeared from our workspace. However, it is still visible to the user. We didn't remove this from our workspace. We didn't hide it from the user. By default, the user will still see this. And by the user, I mean the person using the prototype. It just moves it out of our way because sometimes when you're building, you end up with a lot of panels and a lot of stuff on the page and you say, oh my gosh, I just don't want to see this thing. I have so many things and they're all kind of layered. Just hide this. And that would take care of that. That would hide that panel, but that's only from our view. So again, it doesn't remove its functionality. It doesn't hide it from the user. It is only to remove it from our view. And if we take a look at some of the other pages that I've been building, Hello from the Future, let's see, let's grab this fun page. So I've got some masters on this page. Let's go back to the outline. I'm sorry, masters in Axure 10 are called components. So if we jump over to, say, this component, you'll see we have the same thing. Hide from view. And again, same reason. Sometimes your page is so full of components, you just don't want to look at them. You just want to get them out of the way. But dragging them out of the way runs the risk that you forget to put them back, or you don't put them back in the right place. So you can temporarily hide this from your view if you just have some monster component that you just want to get out of the way. I have used this, though honestly, not very often. So it's just another thing to know about what's cooking in the outline. Also, you'll notice that my components, formerly called masters, are pink. That might not help if you are colorblind. I apologize that some of Axure isn't colorblind friendly. But there you go. So hello from the future for a few more things I wanted you to know about the outline. Libraries are pretty much exactly what they sound like. These are pre-made groups of individual widgets or combined components. So whether this is a single box, a block of text, an icon, or your entire website header, you can create these libraries. Now, by default, Axure 10 comes with 5 libraries. If you're in Axure 9, you are probably missing, I think, form patterns, but you should all have default, flow, icons, and sample UI. So default are the main Axure widgets you're going to use. You're going to see me in this library for most of our time together, but I will be in some of the other ones as well. So these are your shapes, buttons, text, lines, interactive elements, form fields, things like that. And so they live in the library, and if you want to use them, you just drag them out. You can resize them by grabbing any of these points. Axure will try to line them up with other things, as you can see. And we can also change widths and heights and X and Y locations from up here or in the style pane, if you prefer. So that's a way to adjust things that you drag out. So all of these things get dragged out. You don't click on them. I double clicked on them and that's what happened. So double clicking on them is not going to help you. It's going to make Axure think you are trying to condense this panel. Now, the icons library, well, we're going to do a whole lesson on flowcharts, so get ready for that separately. Icons is basically an older version of Font Awesome. This means that if you want to search through icons, here's a search interface, you would have to know what Font Awesome has named the icon. And in some cases, these are not obvious. So for example, our hamburger menu is not hamburger menu. In Font Awesome, it's bars. And then here I can drag out bars. I could resize this. I would have a traditional hamburger menu. So there's lots of great icons in here, but you can, sometimes they're hard to find because it's a question of what did Font Awesome call them. And Axure brings these out not as text, even though Font Awesome is a font, it brings them out as images. If you would like to use Font Awesome as a font, you absolutely can. You'll need it installed on your computer, and you'll want to go back to our publishing generators, which we talked about in the menus lesson, to make sure that you have mapped Font Awesome to show up correctly. So that's icons. Looking at sample UI patterns, this is basically where Axure has tried to pre-build for you some common things that people tend to want. tabs. Let's drag out tabs. Now, I'm going to teach you later how to build tabs from scratch. Is it because there's something wrong with Axure's tabs? No, but thing one, you're not going to know how to control these or do things with them if you haven't learned how you would build this by hand. So number two, it's great to know how to build this by hand, just in case Axure's default library item does not work for you, or you prefer to build it by hand, or any other reason. So rather than telling you, yeah, just drag out stuff that Axure already made, I would rather teach you to fish than hand you the fish. So some of these things that exist in Axure, we're going to learn to build together by hand. And that way, number one, you've got that skill. And number two, if you wanted to edit and change this, it would you would know what to do. And how important is that? Endlessly important. That's why you're here. So we're going to do tabs. We're going to do a carousel type of thing. It's funny. It looks like they almost copied some of my lessons, but hey, who can say? Pagination, cards, and stuff. So Axure has pre-made these common patterns for you. Same thing with some forms. So floating actions, split button. There was one here that I played with the other day that was pretty neat, predictive search. But predictive search is a little bit hard to use because it uses a repeater. And we would have a lesson much, much later about repeaters because I usually do repeaters as part of my advanced skills class rather than my core skills class, but just know that there will be a lesson on this later. Otherwise, without understanding repeaters, you're looking at this and you're going, how do I get data in here? Is this relevant? What's going on? So some of these more advanced Axure widgets are cool and they are interesting, but number one, I would want you to have the skills to know how to build them from scratch if you needed to, so that you're really learning to use Axure. And number two, some of them use some of Axure's most advanced features like repeaters. So we are not going to be learning that until way later, probably in my advanced course. And this is core skills. So let's just say to be continued. Now, another cool thing to know about libraries is that you can create your own. So if you at your company or freelance job or agency have a style guide, design system, UI kit, component library for a particular project or client, you can create your own Axure library. This can be saved as a library and then people can bring it in. So if someone else has built that library, you can say add it. Now it will be here and you can access it. Or we can start our own library file, say new library, or if you're going to be collaborative, new team library. And the idea is that you are creating your own library that can then be distributed to people, and they would have access to the things that you've made, whether it's a single thing like a logo or an item, or it's a more complex thing like some of the UI patterns you just saw. It could hypothetically be your entire website header. Now, one thing to notice about Axure libraries is that they are moments in time. And so if you drag something out of a library, so let's say it's one of these sample UI patterns, we drag it out of our library and we use it. And let's say down the road, Axure updates this library, or it's one of your libraries and you update it. You will get the fresh library when you reload that library from the system. So you can remove it, you can re-add it, things like that. But careful here. It will not change anything you've already put on your workspaces. So if the tabs got updated later, these tabs would still look like this. Axure does not go back into every time you dragged something out of a library and change it. And you can understand why, because probably half the time you want what you already designed to continue to look like what you already designed. And half the time you might wish these things auto-updated. So it's a little bit hard there. It's a little bit tough. These things are not going to auto-update. We might have to use other paradigms for that. We'll talk a little bit about that next with components. So components have been the same in Axure for a very long time. The only difference is now they're called components. They used to be called masters, but as people are changing their language, Axure changed also, which is good of them. And so we have components. Now, I teach components from a beginner perspective and from an advanced perspective. So let me tell you quickly what that means. A component is anything that you want to reuse over and over, and for the most part, it's going to look the same each time, and it's going to work the same each time. Now, that's the beginner's view of the component. From the advanced view of the component, there are times where we can make the same component look a little different, and there are times where we can make the same component behave a little different. But for the purposes of our beginner course, our core skills, I'm going to act like components are always going to look and work the same. And in our advanced skills course, we'll be talking about how you can make components a little bit more flexible. But I found that when I was teaching Axure newbies, it was a bit much to get their head around so early when I'm still showing you what the heck is on the screen. So let's make a component. We can hit our plus. Notice it opens up a tab for us in our canvas area, and we can give it a name if we'd like. I like to say slow motion double click or single click there. So let's pretend this is going to be an important icon that we're going to use over and over. I do like to put icons into components because I'm not a visual designer. So sometimes I'm using a placeholder icon, and later on a visual designer is going to sweep on through and go, oh, we've got a better icon for that. Now, I will not want to go to every single place where I put that icon and have to manually change it. So remember, the components, or formerly known as masters, are for having global control over something. Let's use an icon as an example. Let's say that I've thrown this icon in. There we go. Let's put it at 0, 0, which I can do with my arrows, or I could do with the XY over here. That's my icon. Back on page 1, let's say we want to use this icon. So I can go over to Components, and I can drag it out. If you double click it, Axure is going to think you want to edit it. So if I double click it, I'm back here editing it. Nope. So you have to drag it out. Now you're saying, Deb, why is it pink? I didn't make a pink thing. And I go, hey, good question. These are those masks that we talked about in the toolbars, in the menus lesson. So here we have masks. And this says, do you want a mask on anything that's a component? So remember that a component is something that we might reuse over and over. If we didn't have it masked, there's nothing here that tells me it's a different type of widget than anything else. I might think that's just another icon. But with the mask, which in the case of components is pink, then this tells us, aha, this is a component or master. And if I were to preview the page, then we can see there is no pink mask on that. We don't have to worry that people are going to see that. This is just for us in Axure to know that it's a component. Now, with something like this, you might be putting this icon in a lot of places. It might be across multiple pages in your prototype. So I'm just going to drag things out. By the way, I like to make things messy and ugly for the comedy of it, so please laugh with me. So let's say we've got our icon in a bunch of places around our file. Now, we're going to wish we could globally control that. Let's say somebody says, hey, we've decided that's not going to be black. It's going to be a different color. We need to change the color. Now, we'll talk later about global widget styling, but let's imagine we used a manual color here. Let's give it this kind of chartreusey green color. Now you can see, even though we have the pink mask on it, here it is, they've all turned green. Same would be true if we resized it. If someone said, hey, that icon's not going to be 50 by 50, it's going to be 38 by 38. Now we can go back, and everywhere we've used it, the icon is smaller. Now, components have the opportunity for you to say, wait a minute, for just this particular one, I don't want it to be globally controlled. I want to use this one separately. So you can context menu click on that, and you can say break away. And what happens is you get whatever was in that component or master, but now it is not globally controlled. It has broken away. So if we wanted to, if we were to switch back, say, yes, all of these icons are going to be medium blue. We come back to page 1 and you'll see all the other ones are medium blue, but this one is not because it is no longer a component. So it is no longer globally controlled by anything you're doing with your components. So here, like our pages, you can create all kinds of fun different things: add, edit, remove, rename, duplicate. You can put stuff into folders. And again, people don't see the folders. That's for your organization. You could have a folder of icons. You could have a folder of other things. I don't even know what. I don't use components that much. And be careful of over-componenting. You don't have to make everything on your page into a component. People tend to confuse it with library item. If you have items that you want to use over and over, you could make library items out of it, but a component is globally controlled and tends to look and work the same unless you know some sneaky advanced things about it. Now, drop behavior is about whether or not you want it to always show up in the same location. So, for example, a website header is probably always going to be at 0, 0, right in the top left of your page. But again, you can put it wherever you like. If you said that this was a breakaway master, then every time you dragged it out, it would break away and it would not be globally controlled. I'm not too sure why you would want that, but if you do, I support you. You can add it to pages kind of en masse. So let's imagine that for some reason we needed this on a bunch of pages. I want it on special page and I want it on special page. And do I want to say where on the page it's going to go? Yes, I've decided it's always at 100 by 100 and send it to the back and only add it if it's not already there and bop, bop, bop. And then I can say, okay. And now if I go back to pages and check on those pages, here it is at X100, Y100. And again, depending upon what this is, that may make sense, it might not make sense, but the feature is there. And finally, you've got your usage report, which tells you which pages is this thing on, because Axure will not let you delete a component while it is in use. So you might try to say, yeah, delete this thing, and Axure says, no, 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 you're using it on these pages. We're not going to let you delete this while it's still in use. So that's a little bit of a heads up about that. So remember, again, for our beginner adventures, think of components or masters as something you're going to reuse over and over, where you always want it to look pretty much the same and you always want it to work pretty much the same. So some people go, oh, I want to make my primary button, my secondary button. And I say, well, hold on, hold on. Those buttons might do different things every time you use them. For the beginner version of components, you don't know how to do that. That's going to be one of our advanced lessons. But you have to also ask yourself, is there a better way? And I would say there might be. Widget styling or global widget styling, and you'll see how you can globally control the look of things like buttons so that you don't have to have the button in a master. The button can have global controlling, some global controls from the widget styling. But again, you can decide how you want to do this. Masters, now called components, can be a little bit harder to work with when you haven't learned those advanced skills. So again, be careful how you use them. And remember, everything on your page does not have to be turned into a component. Only think of components for things that you're looking to reuse throughout your file and that they're always going to pretty much look and work the same way each time. Let's also quickly take a look at what you would do if you've already built some stuff and then you've decided you want it to be a master. So let's imagine that we've dragged a couple of things out onto our workspace here. Let's imagine we have this silly bars thing and a label next to it. Bars. Now let's imagine for some reason these two things together should be a master. You might imagine you have to go to components and say new and recreate it or cut and paste it, but there is an easier way. You can just select the things that are involved in the thing you want to become a component. You can context menu, click on them, and down towards the bottom you will see create component. If you're in Axure 9, you will see create master, same thing. I can say create component. What do I want to name it? Hamburger bars. Okay. And now I've got a new master called hamburger bars. And plus this one now has the pink mask on it, showing that it is now a component. So I can drag it out. I can use it in multiple places. And now it is a component. So you can create a component by starting first with a blank one, or you can create a component from things you already have on your workspace and just want to convert them. Now, interactions, I'm not really going to talk about much right now because interactions we're going to build as we go. But I do want you to know that there is this whole bottom area that says properties. So sometimes we're hanging out in interactions, sometimes we're hanging out in properties, sometimes Axure has hid these by default. And I'm telling you to look for a property and you don't see it. So you need to click show all. Why is that there? I don't know. I don't think it should be there. I think it's an extra step that I don't need. I pretty much always want to see this stuff, but there you go. We're going to hang out in properties a lot. And we talked earlier about how in the outline, you can see my outline is starting to get a little bit complicated with all the stuff that I've been adding. And let's say this circle is really important. Let's say we want to make sure that we can find it later, especially in a world of lots of circles. So we can give it a name. That name lives up here in the interactions panel. By default, it's an ellipse. So you can see when I click on something here, it shows up in the outline panel. And when I click on something in the outline panel, it's highlighted here. Now I can give it a name. So I can either slow click on it here, and now I can give it a name. Or again, I can choose it and come up here and give it a name. I tend to do it this way, but again, there's no points off for doing it the other way. So I'm going to call this important circle. And so now when we see this in the outline, it's called important circle. Now, circling back to a little bit more of things to know about the outline, I talked about how we were going to talk about these filters over time. Look at this filter that says has name. The only thing that I've named so far is the circle, but there's some stuff that we dragged out here from Axure that they must have put a name on. So let's try erasing this. Aha! So once we removed what we put out from the Axure library earlier, we can see that when I filter by has name, I only get the one thing that I named. That's something I do a lot in Axure, and you'll see me do it throughout my lessons, so that things with names are important that I'm going to need to find later, important that are going to be part of an interaction, things like that. And that way, if your stuff is getting overwhelming, you can always filter by things that have a name or uncheck this and get everything all over again. So naming things will come into play. I've got a whole system for how I name things. I like to name it what it is and name it what it is. But we'll see that in action as we get building together in future lessons. Notes. So you can select an individual widget and you can create notes about it if you would like. And so I can have note 1, note 2, I can have multiple separate notes. And the idea is that these might be for different people. So you can play with notes. I have to admit, I rarely use them because I find that normally when I am delivering prototypes to the people I'm working with, they just want to move through the prototype and see how this thing works. They typically don't want to read a lot of notes, but you can use the notes as annotations, something special that you want to make sure somebody knows. And you can even make entire sets of notes. So I could say, here are my notes for engineering, and here are my notes for product, and here's my notes for the visual designer, just as an example. And now you can see over here, there's a new menu. Which notes do you want to see? Engineering notes? Okay, now I can write in a note to engineering. and create a new note to them. Or I can have notes for different people. Now, where does that come into play? That used to mostly come into play into that weird generate word specification that we talked about earlier, where I can say, hey, when I'm generating this thing, do I want all of my notes? Do I just want certain notes for certain people? And there was a setting here that allowed you to pick which notes you were going to include. Now I'm having trouble finding it because, hey, Axure. But somewhere in here, there was a list of which notes set did you want in here. And that way, hypothetically, you could spit out a document that just had the notes for one particular group of people. But in general, I really don't use the notes because the only places you can see them would be in the Axure file. And remember, people don't have to have a copy of Axure to see what you've published. Or they would have to see it in the prototype and you would have to turn notes on, or you'd have to spit them out as some documentation. So you have to decide whether or not that's a positive for your workflow or something that doesn't totally make sense for you. And yeah, again, this is for the widget notes, but I don't use them that much. So, maybe you can comment on the video and tell me how you use them, and maybe I'll be inspired. And as we mentioned earlier, the style panel is really just kind of a copy of what's living in the style toolbar, except there's more stuff here, but also different stuff. Because, for example, this show and hide thing, it's over here now. It didn't used to be. It's over here. And then these other things, the padding and stuff, that's down here. And then this looks like different alignments. I'm not sure that's here. So, oh yeah, here it is. It's over here. So I don't hang out in this style thing, and I don't even hang out very much in the toolbar. I'm going to show you how I use global widget styles instead of making manual ones. But where you're doing a quick prototype where the global styling doesn't matter, you can certainly work from here. All right, so that wraps up our look at panes. Remember, we're going to be using these panes together, pretty much all of them, except for notes, throughout the entire course and in all of my courses. So if the quick overview didn't totally make sense, remember you're going to learn them with more depth as I build stuff and teach you how to build stuff. So let's continue to the next lesson.